It's the month of October, and you know what that means. We've got a ton of sports going on. Hockey, basketball around the corner, baseball playoffs still here, NFL, college football. But Kings hockey, what to expect this season? What they do in the offseason? What can we expect this season? Find out in the next edition of Sideline Sports Podcast. Welcome to Sideline Sports Podcast. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. What's going on, guys, and welcome to another edition of Sideline Sports Podcast. I am the host, Alex Naveja, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. If you guys are enjoying the content we're throwing out there on social media, especially the interviews under the lights, we will be putting an episode up tomorrow night. We'll be at Bishop Amat versus Sarah tomorrow. You can find it on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on X. Make sure to follow us down below. And while you're at it, hit the subscribe button down below, hit the thumbs up, and comments down below as well as far as what you think Kings hockey are going to do this year. But you know what? When you talk about Kings hockey, you have to just somehow add this guy's name, whether it's just Zach or whether it's Dooley or if it's Zach Dooley, because he's only with LA Kings Insider and the genius behind everything that has to do with covering the Kings hockey. But Zach Dooley, folks, jumping on the podcast with us. What's going on, Zach? Long time no see. I know you've been a busy man lately.
That's for sure. Opening night just behind us. I know we talked last. I think it was during the playoffs last year, which is the most exciting time of the year. But season opening is probably the second most exciting time. You're getting back into it. It's been a long off season. The preseason is great, but then it gets old really fast, and you just get excited to get into the games that matter. One game that matters is kind of behind us now, and 81 more. So it's going to be a long way to go, but really exciting to get back into it.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, when it's hockey season, once the temperatures start to go down, and you know basketball season is pretty close, and you know in the fall, winter time, and even playoffs time, you know it's basketball and NHL. You're switching Lakers to Kings or Clippers to Kings, however it may be. But you know what? Last night didn't exactly go the Kings' way. 5-2 the final for the Colorado Avalanche. They won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago, but the Kings getting eliminated by the Oilers in the playoffs when you jumped on. We talked a little bit about that matchup. Great hockey, by the way. I just can't get over watching that one. Just sad to see the boys get eliminated. But since then, just a quick summary. What were some big moves that stood out to you in the offseason for the Kings?
Well, the biggest move was acquiring Pierre-Luc Dubois from the Winnipeg Jets. He's a big center, very skilled, has been a 60-point guy in the past, similar number of penalty minutes. So he's big, he's physical, and he's skilled. And the purpose of that move was to make the Kings a team that could compete at the center position with every team in the league. And I think center ice is widely regarded as the most all-around position in the game because guys are contributing offensively, they're contributing defensively, and they have to be able to do both. And by adding Dubois, you add him into the group with Andrei Kopitar, franchise legend, Philip Deneau, one of the best two-way centers in the league, and Blake Lizotte, who is an Energizer bunny on the fourth line. And suddenly you have a group down the middle that can compete with just about any team in the league. And if you look at the past few Cup champions, they've all been dynamic, skilled, and tough to play against down the middle. That was a player that became available in the offseason. The Kings didn't expect him to be available, but when he was, they pounced. They signed him to an 8-year extension, and he's an LA King for the long haul.
I mean, why not get one of the biggest centers in the game? But I know they gave up a pretty hefty package as well for him as well, right? A lot of big named Kings that were giving up, right?
Yeah, it was Gabe Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, Rasmus Kupari, and a second-round draft pick going the other way. So it was a big haul for sure. The Kings made a decision, right? You don't get good players in a trade without giving up players who are hard to lose. And, Gabe Vilardi had a terrific breakout year last year. Alex Naveja has been a consistent piece for this team for a number of years, and Rasmus Kupari was an effective bottom of the lineup player. Good skating, good energy. So it's tough to give up that package, but you do it when you think you have a piece that can put you over the top. And the Kings were a team last year that had a ton of depth, but they didn't always match up at the top end against some of these teams around the league that had these very high-end players. The Kings added another high-end player into the mix, and they believe that over the course of a year and ideally into the playoffs, it makes them a much harder team to play against.
And I just feel like in the playoffs last year, they kind of fell short offensively. I mean, when it came down to scoring, they had a tough time scoring against Edmonton. And I feel like with this trade, you can absolutely now expect to see some offensive production and certainly get some more points on the board here for the Kings and the long haul of this season.
Definitely helps. So far, Dubois has played with Kevin Fiala, who was over a point per game last year. And the two of those guys together, they've had kind of a rotating third line mate, but the two of those guys could be a very exciting pair. Fiala is one of the most dynamic, kind of game-breaking players in the league. And the Kings brought him in the year before, and he had a really good year last year, but he didn't find a home on a line. He was moved around the lineup a lot, played with a lot of different guys, used with guys to try and get other guys going. But he would like to have a permanent line, and the hope would be that he can partner with Dubois, who's a skilled center as well. The two of them can form a good combination. And whether it's Arthur Kaliev or Alex Laferriere as the third member of that line, or maybe even someone else, the hope is that gives the Kings another scoring line so that when you face most teams, they don't have 1, 2, 3 the way the Kings do. So if you only have 2, you're going to have to pick and choose where you do your matchups. And that's, in an ideal world, what could set the Kings apart.
Absolutely, said that very well. And you mentioned the youngster Laferriere, who is actually he got the call up from Ontario, and very unfortunate circumstances without a very dominant Victor Victor Arvidsson, and I think that's a tough blow for the Kings to not have Arvidsson. But the way I see it is I just feel like the Kings have such great young talent and getting a lot of those first round picks from the draft in previous years that it gives them an opportunity to see some time on the ice in the NHL level as opposed to the AHL. But I know you've taken a look at Laferriere. What have been your thoughts? What have you seen from him? And what can we expect from the youngster?
Really impressed with Laferriere so far. In his debut last night, the highlight you're going to see is the fight that he had. And he's certainly not a fighter by trade, but it certainly gotten a lot of buzz. It was on the Pat McAfee show today, so that was pretty cool. His whole family was there. It was a really cool night for him, but he can play. He made this team because of the strong camp that he had. He did not come into camp in a roster spot. He got there through his play. He earned a spot on this team. He's jumped over guys in the pecking order, and he's risen into this role where now Arvidsson is out for at least the foreseeable future. Being on LTIR, he's out a minimum of 10 games or 24 days. So Laferriere is going to have a real opportunity to prove himself as an NHL player. He only played 4 games in the AHL. Like, he's not an experienced minor league guy. This is really his first taste of pro hockey. And the way that he's played so far, he's playing like he doesn't want to go back down to the AHL. And that's a really good thing for the Kings.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a bright future ahead of him. I mean, he's just getting his feet wet here in the ice and the NHL level. But with you, of course, you attend every game. What were your thoughts on last night's Kings performance before we jumped on? I know you're talking about, man, I think they just needed just one more tick ahead of them. And I think we would have seen a different scoreboard last night.
It was close, right? It's the first game of the year. And, I don't think the Kings played poorly at all. I thought flow-wise, it was about an even game. But the Kings maybe didn't get enough pucks to the net. They didn't have enough of a shooting mentality, especially on the power play. The power play was one of the biggest assets for the team last year. Last night it was 0 for 5, and they had their opportunities. I think that the group felt that they moved the puck pretty well, but they passed it a little bit too much. They didn't shoot the puck enough, and when you don't shoot the puck enough, you can't score. So it was very close from the Kings. There were a lot of opportunities where the guy making the pass and the guy receiving the pass were both on the same page, but the execution just wasn't there. They saw the right play, but maybe a pass was behind a stick or over a stick or just beyond a stick. It was that close to being there. So it's a long season. A lot of the things that you wanted to see from the Kings were there. You saw some top end players have good games. You saw a couple of younger players, LaFerrier and Quentin Byfield, especially have really good games. So that's encouraging. It's a tough schedule here to start the year. First, I believe 6 games are all against teams that made the playoffs last year. So it's going to be a tough test to start the year. No games will be easy, but there are some positives for sure from that first game, despite, a 5-2 score.
Yeah, you mentioned as far as the next 6 games are pretty tough for the Kings. And I mean, no doubt they're going to stay here at home to play against the Hurricanes, go on the road to play against the Winnipeg, to be on the road and play against the Wild, then to be home against the Bruins, then the Coyotes, then to be back on the road to play against the Coyotes. There's some teams in there that are going to be pretty tough as well. So they're put to the test early on in the year, but again, just to throw some fire at the Kings and see, hey, how do you handle the pressure here early on?
It's definitely a tough way to go, right? If you look at those opponents, Colorado won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago. Carolina was arguably the best team in the regular season last year by a lot of those advanced metrics. And then you get to that road trip, Minnesota, Winnipeg were both playoff teams, and they're 2 teams that have played the Kings very tight over the last couple of years, and have had their number at times. And then after that, Boston won the President's Trophy last year. And then there's the 2 games against Arizona, a team that did not make the playoffs last year, but added a lot of pretty promising young players in the offseason. And then the game after that is the Vegas Golden Knights, who won the Stanley Cup just this past year. Like, where is this team at? We'll learn a little bit about kind of the starting point over these first few games. And we've seen it over the last couple of years. The Kings haven't had necessarily the best starts to seasons. Last year, they dropped their first 2 at home. The year before, I think there was a 6-game losing streak, but they are still important because every 2 points counts, and you don't want to be looking back kind of at the end of the year wondering about those 2 points or 1 point from early in the year. Important to kind of find your form early and just get off and running.
Absolutely. You got to figure it out early on in the year. And again, you can't give up points. And even then, if you could be on the road and just kind of even finish up with 1 point, that's still a win. Not exactly a win, but if you could go away with some points, that's still better than no points. But I'm going to put you on the hot seat, and I want to finish up with this one. Considering the moves that they did in the offseason, and you've seen them with countless practices, you've seen them what they're going to look like this year. What do you think, man? You think they're going to be at the top of the Pacific Division, or what you got?
If the pieces come together the way that they're capable of, this is a team that could be in the division title race for sure. They're a better team on paper than they were last year. And last year's team finished 1 point off of a franchise record for points. So this is a team, in my opinion, that is capable of hitting those marks. That being said, there's a lot of good teams in the Pacific. There's Edmonton and Vegas, who are still as good as they were last year, if not better. You have a Calgary team that'll likely bounce back. Seattle was in the playoffs last year. They are not going anywhere. Vancouver, San Jose, Anaheim, you never know. Those teams could surprise as well. So it's a tough go. But you have to like what the Kings have done in terms of constructing the roster. And now it's kind of about executing, because there are a lot of ranges of outcomes for sure. And you already lost a key forward in Victor Arvidsson. Now there's an opportunity for younger players to step up and fill bigger roles. So a lot of excitement for sure about what this team could be. Now it's time to kind of see how it comes together on the ice.
Well, there you have it, guys. Game 1 went down last night for the Kings. Went against the Avalanche. Didn't go exactly planned. 5-2 final at that one. But you know what? Game 1 of a very long season to come here for the NHL. You guys can catch all the coverage with Zach Dooley. I'll put his social media down in the description below so you guys can follow him and stay up to date with everything LA Kings hockey. But that's all the time we have left here on Sideline Sports Podcast. We thank you all so much for joining us for this one. If you guys like this episode, please give it a thumbs up. Also, comment down below, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you guys know when we upload. And of course, follow us on all of our social media platforms. And once again, with LA Kings Insider Zach Dooley himself, breaking down a little bit of the offseason that went down, and of course, what to expect this season for the Kings. Zach, as always, thanks for jumping on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
No worries, dude. Anytime.
And I'm Alex Naveja from Sideline Sports Podcast. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into this one, guys. Have a good one and enjoy all of the fall and winter sports coming up.